You only exist because of hydrogen bonding. Hear me out. So a hydrogen bond is something that can happen when you have a molecule with a hydrogen atom in it near another molecule with a hydrogen atom in it. These molecules can interact with each other because the hydrogen atoms in them can form something called a charged dipole, plus a bunch of other stuff. Why is it never simple when it comes to molecules? But a great example of this is water. A water molecule obviously has one oxygen atom and two hydrogen atoms in it. And when you get lots of water molecules near each other, the charged dipoles can interact with each other. It's actually what gives water some of its properties. Notably, hydrogen bonds are why, when the temperature drops below freezing, water solidifies into a crystal, what we call ice. When the temperature drops, the hydrogen bonds become relatively more important, and they act to push the molecules away from one another, locking them into a regular structure, what we call a crystal. And because the hydrogen bonds push the molecules further away from each other, it means that ice is less dense than water. But how come that means we exist? Well, think about what would happen if water ice was more dense than liquid water, which is the case for like most substances in the universe. Imagine what would happen to a lake freezing. So the lake would freeze because the air temperature above it is below zero. And so the top layer of the water is also below zero. It freezes solid. If ice was more dense than the water below it, that ice would just sink. It would go all the way to the bottom, which would expose more water to freeze and then drop down, to freeze and drop down. And eventually, the lake would freeze solid from the top to the bottom. Whereas with ice being less dense than water, what you actually get is just a crust of frozen ice at the top and then liquid water below. And that's significant because at several points in the Earth's past, we think that the entire Earth has frozen solid in what we call a snowball or slush ball Earth. And if water ice was more dense than liquid water, that would mean that all the water on the planet would just freeze. There would be just ice from the top of the ocean to the very bottom. And that would be game over for life. Even the stuff in hydrothermal vents. Well, maybe not the stuff in hydrothermal vents, but they're always the exception. So if it wasn't for hydrogen bonds pushing the water molecules in ice slightly further apart from each other, we wouldn't exist. And I'm sure that there are biochemists out there who could tell me more interesting ways in which hydrogen bonds have led to complex life, but like that's my physicist take on it. Hydrogen bonds are cool.